Welcome everybody and God bless. On today's video of the Catholic Voice, we are going to begin a series of videos over the Virtus series written by Father Miguel Fuentes from the Institute of the Incarnate Word. In this series of books, Father Fuentes addresses the biggest or the most prominent predicaments that society finds itself in throughout this third millennium. And today we are going to begin this series on book number 7, which is Fatherhood in Crisis. Now, obviously, from the title in itself, we can see what this book will pertain to, correct? He writes this book trying to address that predicament, which is fatherhood in crisis, the disunion of the modern family and the absent father. So today we're just going to be going over the introduction. So Father Fuentes begins this introduction by saying, the imbalance that assails our society is in large part a crisis of fatherhood. I am speaking principally of the role of the male parent. However, he also then implies that much of this can also, which pertains to fatherhood, can also be in regards to motherhood, right? You need to have mother and father, and the action of one also affects the other. And so he jumps right in with a very good quote from a French feminist sociologist, Evelyne Souleron. And she says that, and keep in mind that this comment which she made in 1993 caused much discomfort with many of her followers. But she says, "What I want is to try to understand and to explain the decline of fathers that we are presently experiencing, a decline that affects both their civil and their social conditions, their biological role in generation, their role in the family, their image in society. The idea that they form for themselves of fatherhood, of their dignity, of their duties, and of their rights, of their perception of their identity as fathers, of the way they establish their relationship with mothers of their children, and with women, and the way in which they envision the future of fatherhood." She continues to speak about how there is a great thing that can be noticed or can be perceived in that man which has been deprived of his fatherhood. It's very evident. Father Fuentes continues to speak about this problem and reiterates that it is one of humanity's most dramatic wounds. He compares this problem with the universalization of information and the energy crisis. However, he places a special emphasis on it, saying that this problem of the fatherhood, the absent father, can be the one which causes the greatest effect, because once you have it present in one generation, the likelihood of it continuing throughout multiple generations, 3, 4, 5, 6, increases dramatically. He says that this problem is very unlikely to be resolved, and if we look at the horizon, it will not begin to clear until the current anti-family politics, which seem to infect many governments throughout the world, are reversed. Now, of course, we have to ask ourselves, what is Father Fuentes trying to refer to when he speaks about this anti-family politics? And he continues by saying, "It's traditional understanding. A man and a woman united in a legitimate marriage in order to love one another and to beget children." We see throughout today's world and many of the governments that this notion, that this fundamental notion of the family, of the woman and the father united through the sacrament of marriage, is completely and utterly disregarded, right? He says that governments rather imply or put special emphasis on the impersonation of the institution of marriage by temporary unions, right? This can be pairing up, getting together and separating, leaving the mother without a father, etc. Divorce, a falling birth rate, abortion, the legalization of homosexuality. Now, we can continue on forever, but what he's trying to say is that if the government doesn't work in union with these ideals, then it's impossible for the people to see it as important, as something that should be stood up for, the union of the family, and it's not going to be reversed. Now, in each of these cases, as long as the government continues to disregard what the legitimate union between man and woman should be, these problems are never going to be legitimately addressed. Father Fuentes continues to talk about how the corruption of the family is not something that began to happen on itself, but rather it was the result of targeted efforts of certain ideologies and certain industries. Now, whether those motives were economic interest or communitarian vices, we see them very prevalent in today's society. The pornography industry, the abortion industry, especially in mass media. The more mass media appeals to the emotions of people for erroneous reasons, the more society begins to completely disregard those fundamental principles. And why do we not see these industries taking an interest in this problem is because their only concern is their profits rather than the good of the human race. Now, the dissolution of the family affects particularly the paternal figure. Of course, it affects the mother, it affects the father, it affects the entire family. However, because the father does not have the same union, the inescapable union that a mother has with her child, it has become much more normalized in society, in single-parent families, for the father to be the one who lacks presence. Father Fuentes then continues to speak about how there are many particular cases in which one parent or even both parents are not culpable of the certain predicament that they find themselves in. There are cases in which, yes, and we see that as a result of concubinage. However, there are many cases in which the father may have been unjustly abandoned by the mother, or maybe the mother was abandoned by the father. In any case, Father Fuentes says that there is no doubt that the case of a father who was missing because they died are much more minimal compared to the absence that result from broken marriages. Now, he finalizes his statements by saying that it is never our job to judge these cases, and the objective of this book is not to look down on the predicaments of these families. It is only to examine and to see comparatively what the family should be versus what the family society thinks should be, and so that we can know which one the correct family is and use that in order to touch the hearts of those which have been entrusted by God, the responsibility of parenthood, so that then we can be examples of what that family should be. Father Fuentes then finishes off the introduction by quoting David Blackhorn to highlight just how different these two situations are and will be continuing in the future. He says, after the year 2000, as people born after 1970 emerge as an increasingly large proportion of our working age adult population, the United States will be a nation divided into two groups, separate but unequal. The two groups will work in the same economy, speak a common language, and remember the same national history, but they will live in fundamentally divergent lives. One group will receive basic benefits, psychological, social, economic, educational, and moral formation that are denied to the other groups. The fault line dividing them will not be race, religion, class, education, or sex. It will be patrimony. One group will consist of those who grew up with the daily presence and provision of fathers. The other will consist of those who did not. Here is the current scale of the problem. The two groups will be roughly the same size. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we invite you to continue watching, as in the next chapter, Father Fuentes talks about the consequences of this problem to society. we invite you to check out the description below, wherein you will find a link if you would like to purchase the physical copy. Thank you so much, and God bless.